Hey guys, welcome back to Maelstrom Gaming Studios. I'm Craig, and we're going to talk about something GW did. They buffed the Tyranids. A little bit, but we're still going to talk about it. This was done in the previous balanced data slate that came out about a week ago. I did not cover it because I was prepping for the GT and we were not using this balanced data slate, but I'm going to cover it in a shorter video here. So if that sounds good, do like and subscribe to stay up to date on all of our content here at Maelstrom Gaming Studios. And if you want to help support us just a bit more, we do have various links down in the description. You could become a channel member. Thank you, channel members. Etsy shop and our Element Games link all go right back into supporting the channel. Let us grow and do more content on the channel. So with all that out of the way, let's dive into today's video. I realize I am wearing red on a red background as I wasn't thinking about that earlier, but nonetheless, we will continue on. So the final balanced data slate came out last Thursday. It proposed or brought out a bunch of nerfs to a lot of the higher end armies, a few tweaks to some of the bottom end armies. Top armies were some Custodes, Marines, specifically looking at Dark Angels and the secondary that revolves around people spamming Devastator Doctrine every single turn. Those things were changed. Demons got a little bit of a change. The Genestealer cult got a small tweak on their secondaries, at least one of them. There might have been a few armies that got buffs besides the Tyranids, but according to GW, we were below the 45% win rate threshold, so we got a little buff. And really, more than a buff, it was a unnerf. Two things for us. The first one is we have our adaptive traits back because that was game breaking enough. They had to take that away. We have them back. We'll talk about those in just a little bit. There's a few things for those of you who started Tyranids post that nerf. You've never played with the adaptive trait. We'll talk about those just a little bit. The other one, which is important, is that our synaptic imperatives are back to the way they were in the Codex. So what that means is that your Hive Tyrant no longer must be your Warlord. And the reason that is important is because if your Warlord dies, you lose your synaptic imperatives. So now, because it doesn't have to be your Hive Tyrant, it can be your Neurothrope or something that's going to be not threatened most of the game. Always have your imperatives. You can be much more aggressive with your Hive Tyrants now. One of the reasons we did see the Flyrant drop off a bit, not only was it the point increase, but the fact that the Flyrant often had to be your Warlord meant that it was getting into harm's way. Maybe we'll see a resurgence of the Flyrant with this change being done. Who knows for sure, but that is a nice change. I do always like having my Neurothrope to be my Warlord, so great that it can continue to do that, as unthematic as that really is. So let's talk about the adaptive traits. So for those of you who might be newer, never played with the adaptive traits as adaptive traits, you know the list. These are the biomorphology lists. Every table has 5 of them. You get to pick one of these when creating your army. Each Hive fleet does also have their own specific one as well. The way we've been playing for the past 6 to 9 months or so was that you had to pick this while making your army and it was fixed. Now you can change that. So what happens is you pick your adaptive trait when you're building your army. You pick it, it doesn't really matter, but you pick what it is. At the start of the battle, you can now change that adaptive, hyper adaptive trait to one of the other ones that follow in the various categories. And when we say at the start of the battle, we are talking about after you deploy, after you pick your secondaries, after any pregame moves happen. That allows us to maybe in some situations better tweak our army to fight against a few certain matchups. It's not going to be this big widespread, oh here come Tyranids, watch out. They have adaptive traits. It's not that great. But there are niche situations that could come up to make things, I don't know, slightly better for us. I tried to come up with a few examples of where this is. Again, when I played Tyranids with the adaptive traits, I pretty much used the one I picked my army to work with, and that was about it. Very rarely did I ever change it, but it's nice to have that option. So a few examples. If you have taken Synaptic Goading, but you are playing on one of the missions that does not allow you to take pre-game moves into no man's land, then you can simply change out your adaptive trait and you do not have a useless adaptive trait going forward for that game. Another example, this is probably one of the most important ones, or the most likely ones to use. If you are playing Gorgon or Leviathan and you are using the free reroll hit or wound adaptive trait, and you play someone like Votann or Death Guard, an army that just naturally turns off rerolls a lot of the time, that reroll adaptive trait probably isn't that useful. So you can swap it for something else. Example I had is in the tournament I played in, you'll see a video on that later, but my last round was against Death Guard, and I did not get my rerolls that I normally do in Gorgon pretty much ever. Never ever, because, well, some of the range stuff did, but not really anything in melee got those. Had I known, or had I had the ability to change it, I would have switched to OBSEC monsters, and that would have made that matchup much easier in the primary game, having objective secured Hive Tyrants to play with and Carnifexes. So that's a big one. Votann is another army that you do not get your rerolls against. At least you don't get rerolls to wound. Maybe you do to hit. I don't know, even though I have the Votann Codex, I don't really remember. Anyway, I know they turn off rerolls. So if, again, you're playing Leviathan, maybe you don't want to take that one and you want to take something else, it allows you to not have a useless adaptive trait. A final other ones that I can think of, Kraken is a common one that I used to use a lot. I often took the +1 to charge. However, sometimes when you're deploying with terrain, in a player place terrain, maybe there's a forest right in front of you, and that one, that can screw up your charges a lot. So you could take the adaptive trait that does not allow you, what's it called? Unstoppable Swarm. So it negates any of the penalties to charge bonuses, so whether it's going through a forest. Another one that is niche, but important to deal with, is Custodies have their Tanglefoot grenades. It's a stratagem that you use on an enemy unit if they're within certain range or whatever, and they lose d6 inches to their movement, whether that is a charge or whether that is just a regular move. Taking this would mean that stratagem is useless and you don't have to worry about it. Yes, you're taking a whole adaptive trait to just counter one stratagem, but trust me, if you haven't played against Custodies, that Tanglefoot strat is one of the most annoying things that can be thrown at you, even though Custodies are full of annoying things. So that's an option. And again, if you're playing Kronos or Behemoth, you can always switch out of OBSEC monsters or switch into it if you need to. Maybe you're up against an opponent that has very little OBSEC and you think maybe you don't need it. Or you have an opponent who has just loads of OBSEC and it might suit you to go for a better option. Those are really the ones I can think of where adaptive traits are useful. Again, I don't know why they ever really took this away from us. It was always a fun little fluffy thing, but it never heavily skewed a matchup at all that I can think of. So that's the way the adaptive traits are. That's pretty much it for our buffs. This is the way the rules are going to be for the next 2.5 months. Maybe not even 2.5, just 2 months or so, depending on the exact launch of 9th or 10th edition. So I don't know, don't get too hung up on it, or that Tyranids are maybe in a low win rate. Feel like I have proven that Tyranids can still have plenty of play in this edition, or this Age of Arcs of Omen, but with 2 months left of 9th edition 40k, just have fun. Yes, our adaptive traits are back. Yes, our Tyrants don't have to be our Warlords, and we can take full advantage of our Synaptic imperatives as we used to. I don't think it's going to change a whole lot, but it's nice to have at least. So thanks for something, I guess, GW, but we'll be getting a lot more come June and July with the Tyranids, so I'm not complaining too much right now. That is all I got. Let me know if there's anything I missed with the Tyranids here. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure I covered it all in depth. Maybe there's an adaptive one that some of you guys out there really like that I have kind of just passed over. I'm trying to think. Maybe if there's ones, I know there's ones where you can get like extra saves if your opponent has a lot of damage 1 weapons. So maybe if you're playing someone with a lot of damage 1 weapons, you take that one instead. I don't know. There's ways. Study it. Maybe you can find an alternative solution. But I still think really plan for your list to have a primary adaptive trait, and then, or I guess they're technically hyper adaptive traits, I think. Have a primary one and then maybe a backup one. But that's all you need to know. Tyranids are still here. Tyranids, while they're much trickier to play and they do struggle against some specific lists, I think they're still great. That's all we got. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll check you out. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time here at Maelstrom Gaming Studios.